The Apache chief said, "Choose any of my daughters, Cowboy, you deserve it." Jack Thompson had always been a man who loved the wide-open spaces. Ever since he was a boy growing up on a small ranch in Texas, he dreamed of adventure beyond the fences and dusty roads he had known all his life. The stories of cowboys, pioneers, and the native tribes who lived in the untamed lands fascinated him. Among these stories, the tales of the Apache people stood out the most. They were known to be brave, proud, and fiercely protective of their land. Jack respected that, even from a distance, and he wanted more than anything to see their world for himself, not as a conqueror, but as someone willing to understand and learn. One bright morning, Jack saddled his horse, a strong brown stallion named Shadow, and set out on a journey that would take him deep into Apache territory. The sun was still low, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, and the air carried the freshness of early spring. Jack felt excitement rise in his chest. Each mile he rode carried him further from the familiar and closer to the unknown. The landscape changed as he traveled. Rolling hills became rugged cliffs, green meadows gave way to dry plains dotted with hardy shrubs, and the soft whisper of small streams turned into the loud roar of rivers cutting through the valleys. As Jack rode, he thought about the stories he had heard about the Apache. They were a people of courage and wisdom, living in harmony with the land. They respected strength, but even more, they respected honor and integrity. Jack hoped that if he approached them with respect and care, he might learn from them, maybe even earn their trust. But he knew it would not be easy. Outsiders were often viewed with suspicion, and rightly so. Many had come to the land seeking to take or destroy rather than to understand. Jack wanted to be different. After several days of riding, Jack finally saw signs of life, a cluster of small structures arranged neatly near a riverbank. The village was lively, yet serene. Smoke curled from the cooking fires, children laughed as they played near the river, and people moved with purpose, tending to their daily chores. Jack slowed Shadow and watched quietly from a distance. He did not want to frighten the villagers or appear as a threat. The Apache he had seen in books and heard about in stories were skilled hunters, warriors, and caretakers of the land. Jack felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. He had never been so close to a culture so different from his own. For a few hours, he observed the village. He noticed the way the people communicated, not just with words, but with gestures, glances, and an unspoken understanding that came from years of living together in harmony. Women carried water from the river in careful balance on their shoulders. Men guided horses and tended to crops, moving with steady confidence. Children ran barefoot across the soil, their laughter echoing across the hills. Every detail told Jack that this was a people who valued community, skill, and respect above all. Jack knew he needed to be cautious. He could not just ride into the village and expect to be welcomed. Instead, he stayed hidden along the edge of the woods, watching as the sun climbed higher in the sky. He studied their routines, trying to understand the rhythm of their day. He noticed a group of warriors practicing with bows and spears near the far end of the village. Their movements were precise, their focus sharp. Jack felt a pang of admiration. He had never seen anyone move with such skill and coordination. These were people deeply connected to their environment, living in a way that Jack had only dreamed about. That evening, as the sky turned golden and the air cooled, Jack made a small camp a short distance from the village. He set up a simple fire, cooked a bit of dried meat, and reflected on the day. He thought about how different this life was from his own. On his family ranch, life was hard in its own way, but it lacked the rhythm, the balance, and the quiet dignity he had observed in the Apache village. He wondered what it would take to earn even a fraction of the respect he saw among them. He knew he could not just rely on his skill with a rope or his ability to ride a horse. If he wanted to be accepted, he would need patience, humility, and courage. As night fell, Jack lay under the stars, feeling both excited and nervous for what was to come. He listened to the distant sounds of the village, the crackle of fires, the soft murmur of voices, and the occasional laughter of children. The stars shone brighter here than they ever had at home, and he felt the vastness of the world around him. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to be a small part of something much larger. He realized that this journey was not just about adventure. It was about learning, growing, and connecting with people whose lives were very different from his own. The next morning, Jack rose early, determined to take a cautious step closer. He groomed Shadow, tightened his saddle, and approached the village slowly, keeping to the tree line. He made sure to keep his hands visible, showing that he carried no weapons. When a few villagers noticed him, they paused and watched carefully, but they did not immediately react with fear or hostility. Jack stopped at a respectful distance and nodded politely. He spoke softly, introducing himself and explaining that he meant no harm, only wishing to learn and observe. An older man who Jack guessed might be an elder or a respected member of the village stepped forward. He looked Jack up and down, his eyes sharp and assessing. Jack felt the weight of that gaze, sensing that every move mattered. After a long pause, the elder nodded slightly, signaling that Jack could stay, but only if he respected the rules and the people. Jack bowed his head in acknowledgement, grateful for this small acceptance. It was the first sign that his patience and careful approach were working. Over the following days, Jack spent his time helping in small ways, gathering firewood, tending to the animals, and observing the hunters from a distance. He asked questions politely, showing genuine interest in their ways and traditions. He learned how to track animals, identify plants, and respect the land in ways he had never known. Slowly, the villagers began to include him in small tasks, testing his abilities and patience. Jack felt a growing sense of belonging, yet he also understood that respect had to be earned, not demanded. By the end of the first week, Jack had begun to feel that he was no longer just a stranger watching from the edges. The villagers recognized his efforts, his humility, and his willingness to learn. While he was still cautious, he started to feel a connection, a sense that this land, this community, and these people could become a part of his life in ways he had never imagined. Jack realized that adventure was not just about riding into the unknown or facing danger. It was about understanding, patience, and the courage to approach life with an open heart. Jack sat by the river one evening, watching the sun dip behind the hills, reflecting on everything he had seen and experienced so far. He thought about the long journey that had brought him here, the stories he had heard, and the lessons he had already learned. For the first time, he felt that his journey was not only about exploring the land, but also about discovering himself. He understood that to truly become part of this world, he would need to continue showing respect, courage, and integrity in every action he took. And so, Jack Thompson prepared himself for the next stage of his adventure, knowing that the Apache village held challenges, lessons, and opportunities that would test him in ways he had never imagined. But he also knew that this was exactly the kind of journey he had always dreamed of, one that would shape him, teach him, and perhaps even change the course of his life forever. Jack Thompson had begun to settle into life near the Apache village. Each day brought new lessons, challenges, and small victories. The villagers were cautious but curious about him, and Jack understood that every interaction mattered. He knew that to truly be welcomed, he had to prove more than just skill. He had to show courage, respect, and reliability. Early one morning, Jack noticed a commotion near the village's animal pens. Several villagers were struggling to corral a group of horses that had broken free from the enclosure. The animals galloped wildly, kicking up dust and panicking as children ran to the side to avoid them. Jack didn't hesitate. He urged Shadow forward and rode toward the stampeding horses. His heart pounded, but his mind remained clear. He had handled wild horses before, but these were not ordinary animals. They belonged to people who trusted him only cautiously. Jack moved carefully, positioning himself to guide the horses back without frightening them further. He used calm, steady commands and gentle nudges with his rope. One by one, the horses began to respond to him. The villagers watched in awe as he worked with patience and precision. It took time and careful attention, but by mid-morning, all the horses were safely back in their pens. The relief and gratitude on the villagers' faces warmed Jack's heart. He realized that trust wasn't given. It was earned, moment by moment, through actions that showed care and skill. After the horses were settled, Jack noticed the Apache chief observing him from a distance. The chief was a tall, imposing man with sharp eyes that seemed to look straight into Jack's heart. He did not approach immediately, but Jack could feel the weight of his gaze. The chief did not speak, but Jack sensed that he was being tested, evaluated for qualities far beyond horsemanship. Courage, integrity, and respect for the land and people mattered more than the ability to corral wild horses. Over the next few days, Jack continued to assist the villagers in various ways. He helped gather firewood, carry water, and repair small structures damaged by recent storms. Each task, no matter how simple, was an opportunity to show that he was willing to contribute to the community. He listened carefully to the elders, absorbing their stories and traditions. He observed the way they moved through the land, hunted, and respected the animals and plants around them. The more he learned, the more he admired their deep connection to the world. One afternoon, a group of Apache hunters returned from a nearby forest, carrying the day's catch. Jack watched them carefully, noticing their precise movements, the way they handled the animals, and the respect they showed for the land and creatures they hunted. He had hunted before, but the approach here was different. The Apache hunted with purpose and reverence, taking only what was needed and honoring every living thing. Jack asked questions politely, and the hunters shared their knowledge with patience, recognizing his genuine interest. The village children became especially fond of Jack. They would follow him around as he helped with chores, asking endless questions about the world beyond the hills. Jack smiled and answered as best he could, happy to share what he knew. Their laughter and curiosity reminded him of the importance of simple joys, of living fully in each moment. The children also taught him about the small but significant traditions of the village, the songs, dances, and games that connected everyone to the land and to each other. Jack realized that these simple lessons were as important as any skill he could bring from the outside world. Jack's connection with the villagers deepened one morning when a problem arose that required courage and quick thinking. A band of wild mustangs had wandered into the village from the surrounding plains, and their presence threatened the livestock and safety of the people. The animals were strong, fast, and unpredictable. The villagers tried to contain them, but panic began to spread. Jack knew this was a moment where he could prove himself, not through force, but through careful planning and action. He studied the situation, observing the movements of the horses and the villagers' efforts. He devised a plan, signaling to the hunters to help guide the animals toward an open field. Jack rode shadows skillfully, positioning himself to direct the horses without frightening them further. Using his rope voice and calm presence, he managed to lead the wild mustangs away from the village. Hours passed, and the task demanded patience, endurance, and unwavering focus. Finally, the last horse was safely guided out of danger. The villagers were grateful, their eyes filled with a mixture of relief and admiration. The chief, who had watched from the edge of the village, approached Jack quietly. He did not speak at first, but his nod conveyed acknowledgement and respect. Jack realized that this moment was more than a simple act of bravery. It was a demonstration of trustworthiness, skill, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. It was the kind of action that earned respect in a community that valued courage and integrity above all else. After the incident with the Mustangs, Jack began to feel a deeper sense of belonging. He was no longer just an observer or a guest. He was becoming a part of the rhythm of the village. He shared meals with the families, listened to the elders' stories of the land and their ancestors, and even learned a few words of their language. Jack understood that respect was mutual. By showing care and humility, he had opened the door to connection, and the villagers responded in kind. One evening, while sitting by the river with a few hunters, Jack learned about the Apache Code of Honor. They spoke of courage, loyalty, and respect for both people and nature. They explained that true bravery was not measured by fighting alone, but by how one acted when no one was watching, how one treated the weak, and how one cared for the land. Jack listened intently, absorbing every word. He realized that these teachings applied not only to the village, but to his own life beyond the hills. The wisdom he gained here would stay with him forever. As the days turned into weeks, Jack's confidence grew, but he never let it turn into arrogance. He knew that acceptance in the village was not permanent. It had to be continually earned through actions that reflected respect and integrity. He began to notice subtle signs of approval from the chief and the elders, the way they invited him to help with important tasks, the way they listened when he spoke, and the occasional approving glance that spoke volumes. Jack cherished these signs, knowing they reflected the growing trust he had built. The villagers also began to share more personal stories with Jack, tales of their ancestors, lessons learned through hardship, and memories of times when courage and wisdom shaped the course of their lives. Jack felt honored to hear these stories. He realized that his presence in the village was no longer just about proving himself. It was about learning, understanding, and contributing to a community that valued him for who he was becoming, not just for what he could do. One morning, a young boy approached Jack with a small bundle of wild herbs. "For you," the boy said shyly. Jack accepted it with a smile, grateful for the gesture. It was a small act, but it symbolized the trust and connection he had begun to earn. Moments like this reminded him why he had undertaken this journey in the first place: to experience life in its fullest, to learn from people whose strength and wisdom came from a deep connection to the land and each other. By the end of the second week, Jack felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He was not just a visitor, he was a participant in the life of the village. Every task, every conversation, every shared meal brought him closer to understanding the values and traditions of the Apache people. He knew that the chief and elders were watching, not with suspicion, but with consideration, evaluating whether Jack's courage, patience, and respect could be trusted over the long term. Jack also began to form small friendships with individual villagers. He spent time learning hunting techniques from one hunter, cooking skills from one of the women, and stories from the elders. Each person contributed to his understanding of the village and its people. Jack realized that trust and respect were built through consistent action, humility, and a willingness to learn. He had seen the results of fear, pride, and impatience, and he understood that those qualities had no place if he wanted to belong. As the sun set one evening, Jack stood on a small hill overlooking the village. Smoke from the cooking fires curled into the sky, children's laughter echoed across the land, and the soft sounds of conversation drifted on the wind. Jack felt a deep sense of peace. He had come seeking adventure, but he had found something far more valuable: connection, understanding, and the first signs of acceptance from a proud and noble people. He knew that this was only the beginning, that the journey ahead would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. But for the first time, Jack felt ready to meet those challenges, guided by the lessons he had already learned and the trust he had begun to earn. Jack Thompson had taken the first real steps toward earning the respect of the Apache people. Through courage, patience, humility, and genuine care, he was slowly proving himself worthy of their trust. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that every challenge was an opportunity to show that he was not just an outsider passing through, but a man capable of becoming part of something greater than himself. And with that thought, Jack prepared for the adventures and tests that lay ahead, determined to continue earning his place in the hearts and minds of the people who had so graciously allowed him to witness their world. Jack Thompson had spent weeks living among the Apache people, learning their ways, respecting their traditions, and gradually earning their trust. Each day had brought him closer to understanding the deep connection they had with the land, with each other, and with the responsibilities that came with living in harmony with nature. Yet, Jack knew that trust could not be taken for granted. He sensed that the true test of his character was still ahead, a challenge that would reveal whether he had the courage, wisdom, and patience to truly belong. One morning, as the sun rose and painted the sky in shades of gold, Jack was summoned by the Apache chief. The chief was a tall, commanding figure with eyes that seemed to see everything. His face was marked with the lines of experience, and his presence alone demanded respect. Jack approached him with a mixture of humility and anticipation. He had been waiting for this moment, wondering what final test might prove his worthiness. The chief did not speak immediately. He motioned for Jack to sit, and they watched the rising sun together in silence. Then, in a voice both firm and calm, the chief said, "Jack Thompson, you have shown courage, patience, and respect. You have worked with our people, learned our ways, and demonstrated skill and care. But true trust is earned not only through action, but through understanding, wisdom, and the ability to face the unknown. Are you ready to be tested further?" Jack nodded without hesitation. He understood that this was not a test of strength alone. It would require thought, courage, and careful judgment. "I am ready," he said, his voice steady. "I will do my best to honor your challenge." The chief explained the task. Far beyond the village, on a ridge that few dared to climb, grew a sacred herb known only to the Apache. It was used in important ceremonies and was believed to carry the spirit of the land itself. Retrieving it required a night-long journey through difficult terrain, facing dangers from both nature and the wild animals that roamed the ridge. Many had attempted the journey and failed, but the chief believed that Jack's heart and determination made him worthy of the attempt. Jack listened carefully to every detail. The ridge was steep, with jagged rocks and narrow paths. Wolves, mountain lions, and other predators were known to roam there. The weather could change without warning, bringing rain, wind, or cold that tested even the hardiest travelers. He realized that this challenge would not only test his physical skill, but also his mental strength and ability to stay calm under pressure. The chief placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. Remember, courage is not recklessness. Strength is not only in the arm, but in the mind. Respect the land, and it will guide you. Harm it, and it will test you. Jack felt the weight of those words. He knew that the success of this journey required more than determination. It demanded humility, patience, and careful observation. Jack prepared for the journey meticulously. He packed only what was necessary: a small amount of food, water, his rope, a sturdy knife, and a blanket. He saddled Shadow, who had become a loyal companion, and rode toward the ridge as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The villagers watched in quiet anticipation, knowing that this journey would reveal whether Jack had truly earned their trust. Some of the hunters offered advice, sharing knowledge about the terrain, the animals, and ways to stay safe. Jack listened with gratitude, absorbing every detail and storing it carefully in his mind. As he approached the base of the ridge, the landscape changed dramatically. The gentle slopes of the plains gave way to jagged cliffs and narrow paths that wound along the edges of sheer drops. Trees became sparse, and the wind blew colder and sharper. Jack tightened his saddle and encouraged Shadow to move carefully. Every step demanded attention, every decision could have consequences. The ridge was beautiful, but it was also unforgiving. As night fell, Jack faced the first true challenges of the journey. Darkness made navigation difficult, and the sounds of the wilderness, howls of wolves, the rustle of unseen creatures, the snapping of branches, tested his courage. He relied on his senses, moving slowly and deliberately, aware that even a small mistake could be dangerous. Shadow responded to Jack's calm commands, navigating the rocky paths with careful steps. Jack felt a mixture of fear and excitement. This was what he had hoped for, a test of both mind and body, a chance to prove his courage and wisdom. Hours passed, and the ridge grew steeper. Jack stopped occasionally to rest and observe the surroundings. He noted the patterns of the land, the way the rocks were shaped, and the subtle signs of animal movement. By staying alert and respecting the environment, he avoided unnecessary risks. He understood the chief's words: respect the land, and it will guide you. Each careful step reinforced his belief that patience and observation were as important as strength and courage. At one point, Jack encountered a mountain lion watching him from a distance. Its eyes gleamed in the darkness, and Jack froze for a moment, understanding the danger. But instead of panicking, he stayed calm, made himself appear larger, and slowly backed away, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The lion eventually retreated, and Jack breathed a sigh of relief. This encounter reminded him that courage was not about fighting recklessly. It was about knowing when to act and when to respect the power of nature. As the night continued, a sudden storm began. Rain fell in sheets, turning the rocky paths slippery and treacherous. Jack pulled his blanket closer around him to stay dry and encouraged Shadow to move slowly and carefully. Every decision mattered. A single misstep could send them both tumbling down the steep slopes. He relied on his experience, his careful planning, and his growing understanding of the land. Even in the storm, he felt a sense of focus and clarity. Each challenge was a lesson, each obstacle an opportunity to prove his determination and wisdom. Finally, after hours of careful climbing, Jack reached the area where the sacred herb grew. It was a small patch of green among the rocks, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Jack approached it with reverence, knowing that this was not just a plant. It was a symbol of trust, connection, and the values of the Apache people. He carefully collected what he needed, making sure not to damage the surrounding plants or the land. This was not a moment for haste or carelessness. It was a moment for respect and mindfulness. On the journey back, Jack faced more challenges. The storm had made the paths even more dangerous, and Shadow grew tired from the long climb. Jack encouraged his horse gently, taking breaks when necessary and carefully navigating the treacherous terrain. His body ached, and fatigue threatened to overwhelm him, but his determination never wavered. He thought of the chief's words, of the trust he had already begun to earn, and of the importance of completing this journey with care and honor. By the time dawn broke, Jack was nearing the village. Exhausted but triumphant, he carried the sacred herb carefully, knowing that he had completed a journey that tested every part of him, physically, mentally, and emotionally. As he approached, the villagers began to stir, sensing that he had returned. The chief was waiting at the edge of the village, his eyes sharp and observant. Jack dismounted Shadow and stepped forward, holding the herb with both hands. The chief studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You have faced the unknown with courage, wisdom, and respect. You have honored the land and you have honored our people," he said. His voice carried pride and approval. Jack felt a deep sense of relief and accomplishment. He knew that this journey had been more than a test of skill. It had been a test of character, patience, and understanding. The villagers gathered, their faces filled with admiration. They saw not just a cowboy who had completed a difficult task, but a man who had shown humility, respect, and courage in the face of real challenges. Jack's heart swelled with pride, but he also felt gratitude. He had learned more than he could have imagined, not just about the land, but about the values that guided the people who lived there. That evening, Jack sat by the fire with the chief and a few elders. They spoke quietly about the journey, about the lessons learned, and about the importance of courage, patience, and respect. Jack listened carefully, absorbing every word. He realized that this journey had changed him. He had faced fear, tested his strength, and learned the true meaning of trust and honor. It was a moment he would carry with him for the rest of his life. As the fire crackled and the stars shone above, Jack felt a deep sense of connection to the land, to the people, and to the journey that had brought him here. He knew that the path ahead would hold more challenges, but he also knew that he was ready. With courage in his heart, respect in his actions, and wisdom gained from experience, Jack Thompson had proven that he was worthy of the trust and honor of the Apache people. Jack Thompson's return to the village was met with quiet anticipation. The villagers had gathered near the river, their eyes searching the horizon, waiting for any sign of him in Shadow. The morning air was crisp, and the first rays of sunlight touched the village, casting long shadows across the earth. Jack rode slowly, feeling every muscle ache from the night-long climb and the storm, yet a sense of pride and accomplishment filled his chest. He held the sacred herb carefully, knowing it symbolized not just a plant, but the trust and faith the Apache chief had placed in him. As Jack dismounted, Shadow nuzzled his hand, sensing the calm relief in his rider. Villagers stepped back respectfully, giving him space. Jack's careful movements reflected both exhaustion and humility. He did not rush, knowing that the moment required presence and honor. The chief, standing at the edge of the crowd, studied him with those deep, piercing eyes. For a moment neither spoke. Silence hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Then the chief nodded slowly, a small smile appearing at the corner of his lips. "You have returned," he said, his voice carrying both relief and approval, "and you have brought what was asked of you." Jack handed the sacred herb to the chief with both hands. "I did as you asked with respect for your land and your people," he said. The chief took it carefully, examining the herb and then looking at Jack with an expression that conveyed more than words ever could. It was a look of trust, pride, and recognition. The villagers murmured quietly among themselves, impressed not only by Jack's success, but also by the way he had carried himself throughout the challenge. It was clear that this journey had changed him. He was no longer simply an outsider. He had become someone they could rely on. That afternoon, the chief invited Jack to a small gathering with several elders. They sat in a circle near the central fire, the sacred herb placed respectfully in the center. The chief spoke first. "Few outsiders have come to our land and shown what you have, Jack Thompson. Your courage is evident, but courage alone is not enough. Trust, humility, and respect are the true measures of a man. You have shown all three. Tonight, we recognize your efforts and the heart with which you acted." Jack listened, humbled by the praise. He had trained for physical endurance and relied on his skills, but it was the understanding of the land, the care he had shown for every step of the journey, and his respect for the villagers that had truly earned him this recognition. He realized that the chief's test was not only about retrieving the sacred herb, it was about demonstrating his character under the most difficult circumstances. As the sun began to set, the chief led Jack to the edge of the village, overlooking the valley below. The wind carried the scents of the river, the trees, and the earth itself. "There are many who seek glory," the chief said, "but few who understand responsibility. You have done both. You have proven that your heart is as strong as your hand." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of the chief's words. This was a rare honor, and he felt it deeply. Over the next several days, Jack continued to prove his commitment to the village. He assisted with preparations for the seasonal ceremony, working alongside the women and children to gather plants, prepare food, and arrange the ceremonial space. He listened attentively to the elders, learning the meanings behind the songs, dances, and rituals. Each task, no matter how small, was performed with care and reverence, reflecting his understanding that the community's traditions were sacred and important. The chief observed Jack closely during these days, testing his patience and integrity in quiet ways. He noticed how Jack interacted with the villagers, how he treated children, and how he moved through the land without causing harm. Jack was careful to show respect in every action, whether helping with a chore, tending to the animals, or simply listening to the elders. His humility and dedication impressed the chief more than any display of strength could have. One afternoon, the chief called Jack to help with a hunting expedition. This was a task usually reserved for the most trusted young hunters of the village. Jack accepted, understanding that this was another opportunity to demonstrate his skill, respect, and reliability. The expedition required careful planning and cooperation. Jack worked closely with the hunters, learning to track animals without disturbing the land, moving silently, and observing the subtle signs that indicated the presence of game. His actions reflected not only his abilities but also the trust he had already begun to earn from the chief. During the hunt, Jack faced several challenges. A sudden storm rolled in and the paths became slippery. A herd of deer ran unexpectedly, and Jack had to react quickly to maintain balance and guide Shadow safely. Each situation tested his focus, patience, and judgment. Jack moved deliberately, relying on both instinct and the lessons he had learned from the hunters and the elders. Every successful step reinforced his growing reputation within the village. By the time the hunt was over, Jack had proven himself to the hunters and the chief. They returned to the village with game, and the chief acknowledged Jack's efforts with a nod. "You act not only with skill but with respect," he said. "This is what sets you apart." Jack felt a mixture of pride and humility. He understood that true honor came not from recognition alone, but from consistent, thoughtful action that benefited the community and respected the land. As the ceremony approached, Jack found himself participating more fully in the life of the village. He helped with decorations, arranged ceremonial items, and assisted in preparing traditional meals. He learned the songs and dances, not to perform them perfectly, but to honor the meaning behind each movement and melody. The villagers accepted him as part of their daily life, and Jack felt a deep connection he had never experienced before. He realized that belonging came from understanding, contribution, and respect, not just presence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the chief called Jack aside. "You have completed the journey, and you have demonstrated your heart," he said. "But there is one more step before we can fully call you worthy of our trust." Jack listened carefully, knowing that this next step would likely test him in ways he had not yet encountered. The chief continued, "Tomorrow you will assist in the ceremony that honors the spirit of the land. You will participate alongside our people, and your actions will be observed closely. This is a moment of respect, humility, and service. Are you ready to meet this final part?" Jack nodded. "I am ready," he said. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also the excitement of being trusted with such an important role. He spent the evening preparing, reflecting on everything he had learned, and ensuring that his actions would honor the traditions of the village. He understood that this was not about him. It was about respecting the people, their land, and the trust they had placed in him. The next morning, the village gathered for the ceremony. The air was filled with the sounds of singing, drums, and the rustle of ceremonial garments. Jack moved carefully among the villagers, participating in ways he had been taught, following the guidance of the elders and the chief. Every movement, every action was deliberate and respectful. Jack felt a deep sense of connection to the land and the people around him. This was a moment of unity, trust, and honor, and he was proud to be part of it. By the end of the ceremony, the chief approached Jack again. His eyes were filled with approval and respect. You have proven yourself in action, in courage, and in heart, he said. You are a man we can trust, not only for what you do but for who you are. You have earned the respect of this village. Jack felt a wave of emotion. He had worked hard, faced challenges, and learned lessons that would stay with him forever. Now he had the recognition and trust he had sought, not through arrogance or force, but through courage, humility, and respect. In the following days, Jack continued to live among the Apache people, now with a deeper sense of belonging. He helped with daily tasks, shared meals, listened to stories, and participated in important events. The villagers treated him as one of their own, and the chief included him in discussions about the land and the community. Jack had earned a place of trust and respect, and he carried that responsibility with pride and care. Jack Thompson had completed the chief's challenge, returned victorious, and earned the deepest respect of the Apache people. But more importantly, he had learned the true meaning of courage, humility, and integrity. He understood that trust was not given lightly. It was earned through consistent, thoughtful actions that reflected respect for both people and the land. He had proven that he was not just a visitor in their world, but a man capable of becoming part of something greater than himself. The days after the ceremony were filled with a quiet sense of celebration and recognition. Jack Thompson had proven himself not only through the challenges of the ridge and the sacred herb, but also through his consistent respect, patience, and humility. The village moved with its usual rhythm, yet there was a new understanding among the people, a recognition that Jack was no longer just an outsider. He was a man they could trust, someone who had earned a place within their community. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the hills and cast long golden shadows across the village, the Apache chief summoned Jack. The chief's expression was calm yet serious, his eyes holding the weight of many years of wisdom. Jack approached respectfully, aware that this meeting would be important. He had learned through his weeks in the village that the chief's words carried meaning beyond the immediate, that every conversation with him was a lesson in trust, understanding, and honor. The chief motioned for Jack to sit beside him. They watched the sun slowly sink behind the distant cliffs, the sky ablaze with shades of orange, pink, and purple. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, in a voice that carried the authority of experience and the warmth of respect, the chief said, "Jack Thompson, you have faced challenges, navigated dangers, and demonstrated courage and humility. You have shown respect for our land, our people, and our traditions. You have earned the trust of this village, and you have honored us in every way." Jack felt a mixture of pride, gratitude, and humility. He bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the chief's words. "I am honored," he said softly. "I came seeking to learn and understand, and I have received more than I could have imagined. I am grateful for your guidance and trust." The chief nodded approvingly. There was a pause, a quiet moment where the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of the river and the earth. Then the chief spoke words that would leave a lasting impression on Jack. "You have proven yourself in every way a man of courage and integrity should," the chief said. "Because of this, you are worthy of the highest honor I can offer. You may choose one of my daughters as your companion, a sign of my trust and recognition. Choose any, and it is yours. This is not given lightly, for our daughters are not possessions. They are the heart of our families and the continuation of our people. Choose with wisdom, and it will honor both you and them." Jack was taken aback. The chief's words were both generous and profound, reflecting a deep trust and respect that few outsiders had ever received. He realized the weight of the moment. This was not simply an offer of choice or reward. It was a recognition of his character, his actions, and the relationship he had built with the village. It was a gesture that reflected the highest level of respect the chief could bestow. Jack thought carefully. His heart swelled with gratitude for the honor, but he also understood the responsibility such a choice carried. He had come to the village seeking connection, understanding, and friendship, not personal gain. To accept such an offer for himself alone would not reflect the lessons he had learned, the respect he felt for the people, or the integrity he hoped to maintain. He bowed his head, choosing his words with care. "Chief," Jack said, his voice steady but full of humility, "your trust and this offer honor me beyond words. But I did not come here seeking reward or position. I came to learn, to understand, and to honor your people and your land. I cannot choose among your daughters for myself. To do so would place my desire above the respect and harmony of your community. I hope you understand my choice." The chief studied Jack's face, his eyes sharp and searching. For a long moment there was silence, and Jack felt the weight of his decision. Then the chief's lips curved into a small, approving smile. "You speak with wisdom and humility," he said. "This is the mark of a true man. You have proven that courage is not only in facing danger, but in making the right choice, even when it is difficult. Your respect for our people and our traditions is the greatest honor you could show." The villagers, who had gathered nearby, whispered among themselves. Many of them were impressed by Jack's humility, recognizing that his actions reflected the lessons they had hoped to teach all those who came into their lives. The children looked up at him with admiration, seeing a man who had not only faced challenges, but had also understood the deeper meaning of respect, honor, and community. In the following days, Jack continued to live among the villagers, now fully accepted as one of their own. The chief included him in important discussions, consulted him on matters of the land, and sought his advice on practical tasks. Jack's relationship with the villagers grew deeper. He shared meals, worked alongside them in daily chores, and learned even more about their ways, their stories, and their values. He realized that true belonging came not from titles, rewards, or personal gain, but from consistent action, integrity, and a willingness to contribute to the well-being of the community. One evening, as Jack sat with the chief near the river, they reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The chief spoke of the lessons Jack had learned, the importance of patience, humility, courage, and respect. Jack spoke of what he had discovered about himself, about the strength that comes from facing challenges, and about the value of earning trust through actions rather than words alone. It was a conversation that deepened the bond between them, creating a relationship built on mutual respect and understanding. Jack's time in the village also allowed him to form friendships with individuals of all ages. He shared stories of the world beyond the hills, listened to the elders' memories and wisdom, and played with the children, teaching them small skills while learning from them in return. These connections were invaluable. Jack realized that being part of a community was not just about completing tasks or earning recognition. It was about building trust, offering kindness, and creating bonds that would last a lifetime. As the months passed, Jack became a bridge between the Apache village and travelers or settlers who passed near the land. He shared the lessons he had learned about respect, courage, and the importance of understanding people and the land. Many who came seeking help or guidance found a man who could speak with integrity, calmness, and wisdom, offering both practical advice and insight into the ways of the Apache people. Jack understood that the greatest honor he had received was not the chief's offer, but the opportunity to live with, learn from, and be trusted by a people whose values had taught him more than any book or story ever could. One morning, the chief called Jack to the village center. Villagers had gathered, and a quiet anticipation filled the air. The chief spoke to the crowd, praising Jack for his courage, humility, and contributions. Then he turned to Jack personally. "You have chosen wisely, Jack Thompson," he said. "You did not take what was offered for yourself. Instead, you honored our people, our daughters, and our traditions. This is a rare gift, a sign of true wisdom. You are one of us now, not by blood, but by action and heart." Jack felt a wave of emotion. He had not sought reward, position, or recognition, yet he had received something far greater: trust, respect, and belonging. The villagers cheered softly, their voices carrying pride, approval, and warmth. Jack knew that he had achieved something far beyond what he had imagined when he first arrived in the territory. He had not only proven himself to the chief and the villagers, but had also discovered the strength, wisdom, and humility within himself. In the days that followed, Jack continued to live with the village, always mindful of the lessons he had learned. He remained humble, respectful, and dedicated to the community. He participated in ceremonies, helped with daily chores, shared his knowledge when appropriate, and listened deeply to the stories and guidance of the elders. Jack had found a place where he truly belonged, a community that valued his heart as much as his skills, and a life rich with meaning, connection, and trust. Over time, stories of Jack Thompson spread beyond the village. Travelers and settlers spoke of the cowboy who had earned the respect of the Apache people not through force, but through courage, patience, humility, and integrity. His story became a lesson for others, that true honor comes not from what one can take, but from the actions, choices, and respect one shows to others and to the land. Jack often reflected on the chief's words, the journey up the ridge, the dangers faced, and the lessons learned. He understood that the greatest victories in life were not measured by wealth, possessions, or recognition, but by the trust earned, the relationships built, and the character demonstrated. He had arrived as an outsider seeking adventure and left as a man forever changed, enriched by the wisdom, courage, and heart of a people who had taught him the deepest meanings of respect, integrity, and honor. And so Jack Thompson remained with the Apache village, not because he sought reward, but because he had found something far more valuable: a home, a community, and a life that reflected the values he had come to cherish. The chief's offer had been the greatest test of all, and Jack had met it not with desire but with wisdom. He had proven that a man's worth is measured not by what he takes, but by what he gives, and by the respect, courage, and humility he carries in his heart.